Somewhere, right now, in a windowless data center cooled to near absolute zero, a machine is humming that most people will never see. Its processors do not behave like the chips inside your phone. They flicker between states of existence, holding contradictions the human brain cannot picture. Scientists call it superposition. The rest of us might call it something stranger. Because what this machine is being trained to do is not search the internet, or generate pictures, or write poetry. It is being trained to undo the locks that hold the entire digital world together. For nearly 50 years, a handful of mathematical problems have quietly protected almost everything you do online. Your bank transfers, your private messages, military communications, government secrets, medical records, all of it sealed behind encryption so complex that breaking it by brute force would take ordinary computers longer than the universe has existed. That assumption became the bedrock of modern civilization. Nobody questioned it, nobody had to, until now. Researchers at some of the most secretive labs on Earth have begun whispering about a date. They call it Q-Day. The day a quantum machine, sharpened by artificial intelligence, finally tears through the encryption holding the modern world together. And the unsettling part is not that this day is coming. The unsettling part is that adversaries may not need to wait for it, because somewhere, encrypted data is already being copied, stored, and quietly filed away, waiting for the key that will eventually open it. This is the story of how the key is being built, and why the people responsible for protecting the digital world are running out of time. But to understand how close we really are, you first have to understand what encryption actually is, and why, for half a century, it has been treated as unbreakable. Modern encryption is not a wall, it is a mathematical trapdoor. Multiplying two enormous prime numbers together is fast. Even a basic laptop can do it instantly. But take that final result and try to work backward to figure out which two primes created it, and the problem explodes in difficulty. With numbers large enough, the task becomes so demanding that classical computers would need more time than the age of the universe to crack it through brute force. This one-way mathematical trapdoor is called RSA encryption, and it has quietly secured global communication since the late 1970s. Alongside it sits elliptic curve cryptography, a related but distinct method trusted by banks, governments, and messaging platforms worldwide. For decades, this system held. Mathematicians built faster computers. Encryption keys simply got longer. The trapdoor problem scaled in difficulty just as fast as computing power scaled in speed. It seemed like a permanent stalemate. Researchers at institutions like MIT and Stanford treated public key cryptography as one of the most stable assumptions in computer science. Then, in 1994, a mathematician named Peter Shor at Bell Labs published an algorithm that quietly terrified the cryptography world. Shor's algorithm proved that a sufficiently powerful quantum computer would not need to brute force the prime factorization problem at all. It could exploit quantum superposition to solve it in a fraction of the time. What would take a classical computer longer than the lifespan of stars would take a capable quantum machine mere hours, or even minutes. At the time, this was theoretical. Quantum computers powerful enough to run Shor's algorithm against real-world encryption keys did not exist. Researchers reassured the public this was a problem for the distant future. For years, that reassurance held. But that wasn't the strangest part of this story, because while cryptographers were debating timelines measured in decades, something else was quietly accelerating in parallel: artificial intelligence. Quantum computing alone has always faced a brutal engineering obstacle. Qubits, the building blocks of quantum machines, are extraordinarily fragile. The smallest vibration, the faintest stray photon, even a tiny temperature fluctuation can cause what researchers call decoherence, collapsing the delicate quantum state before any calculation finishes. For years, this fragility was the single biggest barrier preventing quantum computers from scaling up to the size needed to threaten real encryption. Then, AI systems began being deployed not to replace quantum computers, but to stabilize them. Machine learning models trained on enormous datasets of quantum noise patterns began predicting and correcting errors in real time, something human engineers could never do fast enough by hand. Laboratories connected to Google, IBM, and a growing list of national research programs began publishing papers describing AI-assisted quantum error correction, achieving accuracy improvements that, just a few years earlier, seemed impossible. This is where the story stopped being theoretical, because a quantum computer that can correct its own errors using artificial intelligence is no longer a fragile laboratory curiosity. It becomes something that can actually scale. And scale is the one ingredient Shor's algorithm always needed to become dangerous. Researchers weren't prepared for how fast that scaling curve began to bend. In 2023, IBM unveiled a 121-qubit quantum processor named Condor, a leap that stunned even insiders who had been tracking quantum progress for years. Around the same time, Google's quantum AI division published results suggesting their error correction techniques powered by machine learning were improving stability at rates faster than Moore's law ever managed for classical computing. China's national quantum research programs, operating largely outside public scrutiny, were rumored to be pursuing similar breakthroughs with even less transparency. None of these systems, as of now, have publicly broken real-world RSA encryption. That distinction matters, and it is important to be precise about it. But here's where the real mystery begins. Because breaking encryption today was never actually the primary danger cryptographers were worried about, the real danger has a name: harvest now, decrypt later. Intelligence agencies around the world have a long, well-documented history of intercepting and storing encrypted communications they cannot currently read, simply betting that future technology will eventually unlock them. The National Security Agency in the United States has openly discussed this strategy in budget disclosures. China's intelligence apparatus is widely believed by Western security analysts to be doing the same, vacuuming up encrypted internet traffic and storing it in vast data centers, patiently waiting. Think about what that means. Sensitive data encrypted today, the kind that feels perfectly safe right now, could already be sitting in a foreign server somewhere, waiting silently for the day a quantum machine finally provides the key. Medical records, diplomatic cables, corporate trade secrets, personal messages between world leaders, all of it potentially already captured. All of it potentially just waiting. And this is where things get disturbing. In 2022, the United States National Institute of Standards and Technology, known as NIST, made an announcement that received surprisingly little mainstream attention given its significance. After nearly 6 years of evaluating dozens of candidate algorithms submitted by cryptographers worldwide, NIST selected a new generation of encryption standards specifically designed to resist quantum attacks. They called this field post-quantum cryptography. The chosen algorithms, including one called Crystal's Kyber, rely on a completely different category of math problem, one based on the geometry of high-dimensional lattices rather than prime factorization, a problem that even theoretical quantum algorithms struggle to crack efficiently. The fact that the United States government invested years and enormous resources into replacing the cryptographic backbone of the entire internet should tell you something. Agencies do not undertake projects of this scale and cost as a precaution against a fantasy. They undertake them because credible internal assessments suggested the threat had crossed from theoretical into plausible within a meaningful planning horizon. But here is the unsettling part most people never hear about. Migrating the entire internet to new encryption standards is staggeringly difficult. It is not like updating an app. Banking systems, government infrastructure, satellite communications, medical devices, industrial control systems running power grids, all of it was built assuming RSA and elliptic curve encryption would remain secure indefinitely. Replacing that foundation requires rewriting protocols embedded in hardware that, in some cases, was installed decades ago and never designed to be upgraded. Cybersecurity researchers have warned that this migration could take a decade or more to complete fully across global infrastructure, which raises an uncomfortable question that keeps showing up in closed-door government briefings. If quantum computers, accelerated by artificial intelligence, become capable of breaking current encryption before that migration finishes, the window of vulnerability would not be measured in days. It would be measured in years. Then something unexpected happened that pushed this story from cybersecurity circles into far wider conversation. In late 2024, Google's quantum AI division unveiled a new chip called Willow. What made Willow remarkable was not simply its qubit count, but a specific milestone researchers had been chasing for almost 30 years. Willow demonstrated what is known as below-threshold error correction, meaning that as researchers added more qubits to the system, the overall error rate actually decreased rather than increasing. For decades, this had been one of the central theoretical requirements for building a quantum computer capable of useful, large-scale computation. Google's own researchers describe the result as a critical step toward what is sometimes called a fault-tolerant quantum computer, a machine stable enough to run extremely long, complex calculations without collapsing into noise. Google's published claims also included a specific computational comparison that generated significant discussion across the scientific community. According to the company, Willow completed a benchmark calculation in under 5 minutes that would take one of the fastest classical supercomputers on Earth an almost incomprehensibly long span of time to complete using brute force methods. It is important to understand what this benchmark actually represents and what it does not. This particular calculation was a specialized mathematical benchmark designed specifically to showcase quantum advantage, not a demonstration of breaking RSA encryption. Critics within the scientific community, including researchers from competing labs, have pointed out that quantum supremacy benchmarks like this one are deliberately chosen because they are problems. Quantum systems are naturally suited to, while classical computers are forced into the least efficient possible approach. Breaking real-world encryption is a fundamentally different and significantly harder engineering challenge, requiring not just speed, but an enormous number of stable, error-corrected logical qubits sustained over long operations. So how close are we, really? Estimates published by cryptography researchers vary widely, which is itself part of the unease. Some experts at university cryptography labs argue that a quantum computer capable of breaking 2048-bit RSA encryption would require several thousand stable, fully error-corrected logical qubits, a milestone that may still be 5 to 15 years away, even accounting for AI-accelerated progress. Other researchers, citing the unpredictable pace of AI-assisted error correction breakthroughs, argue the timeline could compress dramatically if a single architectural breakthrough emerges, the same way transformer-based AI models suddenly accelerated the entire field of machine learning after decades of incremental progress. What nobody disputes is the direction of travel. Every year, the gap narrows. And every year, more encrypted data accumulates in storage somewhere, waiting. The real mystery had only just begun, because this is no longer simply a story about machines. It is a story about secrecy, and about which governments are telling the truth regarding how far they have actually gotten. China's quantum research programs operate with a level of state secrecy that makes independent verification extraordinarily difficult. In 2023, Chinese researchers published a paper claiming a method using D-wave quantum annealing machines that could theoretically threaten certain encryption standards, using far fewer qubits than Shor's algorithm requires. The paper triggered alarm across Western cybersecurity circles before independent researchers, including cryptographers reviewing the methodology, raised serious doubts about whether the technique would actually scale to real-world encryption strength. The claims were walked back, partially retracted, and remain disputed within the scientific community to this day. But the episode revealed something important. It revealed how thin the line has become between genuine breakthrough and geopolitical signaling. In a field this opaque, with stakes this high, nations have every incentive to either exaggerate their progress to project strength, or conceal their progress entirely to maintain a strategic advantage. Intelligence analysts at institutions tracking global quantum development have openly stated that the true state of military and intelligence-grade quantum research, in any country, is likely far more advanced than anything published in open academic literature. This is where the philosophical weight of the story really settles in, because for the first time in modern history, the foundational trust underlying global digital communication, the assumption that a locked message stays locked, is no longer guaranteed by mathematics alone. It is now a function of geopolitics, secrecy, and a technological race that almost nobody outside a small circle of specialists fully understands. Governments have started responding, though unevenly. The United States passed the Quantum Computing Cybersecurity Preparedness Act in 2022, legally requiring federal agencies to begin inventorying systems vulnerable to quantum attacks and start migrating toward post-quantum standards. The European Union Agency for Cybersecurity has issued similar guidance to member states. Apple announced in 2024 that its iMessage protocol had been upgraded with post-quantum encryption, specifically designed to resist future quantum decryption attempts on intercepted messages. Signal, the encrypted messaging platform widely used by journalists and activists, implemented a post-quantum upgrade to its encryption protocol for similar reasons. But here's where the real mystery deepens. Despite these high-profile moves by major tech companies, the vast majority of global digital infrastructure remains unprepared. A 2023 survey conducted by cybersecurity firm DigiCert found that the overwhelming majority of organizations surveyed across multiple countries had no formal plan in place to transition to quantum-resistant encryption, even though most respondents acknowledged they understood the threat existed. Awareness, it turns out, is not the same as preparation. And preparation requires something most institutions are reluctant to spend: enormous amounts of money, time, and coordinated global cooperation, precisely the things modern bureaucracies struggle most to mobilize quickly. Here's where things become genuinely unsettling on a personal level, not just a geopolitical one. Consider what Harvest Now, Decrypt Later actually means for an ordinary person. Health records transmitted to insurance companies today, encrypted and seemingly safe, could theoretically be decrypted a decade from now. Financial transactions, private legal communications, even years-old encrypted messages sitting in some forgotten server could eventually become readable. The data does not need to be valuable today to be dangerous tomorrow. It only needs to still exist somewhere, waiting. Researchers at the Cloud Security Alliance have specifically warned organizations handling long lifespan sensitive data, such as genetic information, classified government records, and intellectual property with decades of relevance, that the quantum threat is not a distant abstraction, but an active risk calculation that should be factored into security planning today, regardless of when an actual quantum break occurs. But the real mystery had only just begun to widen further because quantum computing and artificial intelligence are no longer developing as separate fields at all. They have become deeply intertwined, each accelerating the other in a feedback loop researchers are still struggling to fully map. AI systems are being used not just to stabilize quantum hardware through error correction, but to design entirely new quantum algorithms. In 2023, researchers published work demonstrating that machine learning models could discover novel quantum circuit designs more efficient than those created through traditional human-led research, sometimes finding solutions that human physicists had never considered. This means the very process of quantum algorithm discovery, the kind of work that produced Shor's algorithm in the first place, is increasingly being outsourced to artificial intelligence systems that can explore mathematical possibility spaces far faster than any human team. This raises an uncomfortable possibility that researchers are only beginning to discuss openly. If AI systems can autonomously discover more efficient quantum algorithms, the next major leap toward breaking modern encryption might not come from a human cryptographer or physicist publishing a landmark paper. It might emerge quietly from inside a machine learning model, optimizing toward a goal nobody fully anticipated inside a lab that may not even fully understand what it has built until much later. And this is where the story turns toward something almost existential. Because the deeper question is not really about RSA encryption or qubits or Shor's algorithm at all. It is about what happens to a civilization that built its entire digital existence, its trust, its privacy, its financial systems, its diplomatic secrets, on a mathematical assumption that quietly stopped being permanent. For 50 years, humanity operated as though certain locks could never be picked. That assumption shaped how we communicated, how we banked, how we governed, how we fought wars and kept secrets. It was, in a very real sense, one of the invisible pillars of the modern world. That pillar is now cracking, not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, in research papers and chip announcements and quiet government memos that rarely make headlines. Some cryptographers argue this story is being overhyped, that genuine encryption-breaking quantum computers remain a distant, uncertain prospect, and that fear-driven coverage distorts a far slower, more mundane technical reality. They point out that quantum supremacy benchmarks like Google's Willow chip solve narrow, specialized problems, not the broad cryptographic challenges security depends on. They argue that post-quantum migration, while important, is simply prudent long-term planning, not evidence of an imminent crisis. Others argue the opposite, that the secrecy surrounding military and intelligence quantum research means the public timeline is, by definition, always behind the real one, and that by the time a breakthrough becomes public knowledge, the most sensitive applications will have already been operational behind closed doors for years. Both positions cannot be definitively proven from publicly available information. And that, perhaps, is the most unsettling truth of all. We are living through a technological transition whose true timeline may not be something the public is ever allowed to know in advance. What we do know is this: the mathematics that protects nearly everything digital about modern life was built on an assumption of permanent difficulty. Artificial intelligence is now actively working to dismantle that assumption, not through malice, but through the same relentless optimization that has reshaped nearly every other field it has touched. Quantum hardware, once fragile and limited, is being stabilized and scaled faster than most experts predicted even 5 years ago. And somewhere, right now, encrypted data already sits captured and waiting, its secret sealed only by a clock that nobody can see and nobody can stop. Governments are racing to rebuild the locks before the keys are finished being forged. Some are further along than they admit, others are further behind than they realize. And ordinary people, whose private lives are quietly encoded into all of this, mostly have no idea the race is even happening. Maybe that is the strangest part of this entire story. Not the quantum chips, not the algorithms, not even the secrecy. It is the fact that the most consequential technological race of our era, one that could determine whether the next decade of human privacy survives intact, is unfolding almost entirely out of public view. Inside laboratories, behind classified briefings, and inside the quiet, humming chambers of machines cooled colder than outer space. Somewhere, a qubit is stabilizing. Somewhere, an algorithm is learning to correct its own errors faster than the day before. Somewhere, encrypted data from years ago is still sitting, waiting for a key that may not exist yet, but is being built, piece by piece, by minds and machines working together in ways even they may not fully understand. The lock is held for 50 years. Nobody can say, with any real certainty, how many years it has left.